Welcome to The Straight Stitch, a podcast about sewing and other fiber arts. This is episode 31, and my name is Janet Szabo. I will be your guide as we explore all things sewing. Winter is still hanging on here in northwest Montana. Today it's only getting up into the mid-40s, and it was actually snowing a bit this morning. Hopefully this won't last long, and we will be back to warmer temperatures and well on our way to spring and summer. I took advantage of the cold weather and the snow to stay inside. I finished making the emerald dress. It's a pattern made by Ray, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes. I made it out of Robert Kaufman Brussels washer linen. The dress is designed to be cut on the bias, and the drape is absolutely exquisite. I did lengthen mine a little bit because I'm taller than average and I like my dresses to be below my knees. And I'm very pleased with the way it came out. I know it will get a lot of wear this summer when it's hot. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do it as a class at the store. I need to take the dress in and have a little discussion with the store owner before I decide to commit to doing a class. And that is about all the sewing that I've done. I did make up a muslin of a blouse pattern that I am trying to perfect. I am very close. And this morning I retraced it and made a few changes, and I'll run up another muslin. And then I think I'll be able to start using that to make some blouses for my wardrobe. On Sunday afternoon, I drove 3.5 hours southeast of here to Butte, Montana. And I have to say that I'm a bit ashamed that I have lived in Montana for 30 years, and I have been through Butte because it's just off of I-90, which is the major east-west southern route through Montana. I've been through Butte several times, but I have never actually been to Butte. So this was an experience, and one that I very much enjoyed. The local NBC affiliate here in Montana does a segment on their newscasts called Montana Moments with Kevin Mackey. And Kevin travels around the state and interviews people and just tries to bring a little bit of Montana into your home. And a few weeks ago, he did an interview with Laura Sargent, whose husband, Sarge, owned an antique store in Butte, Montana, and he was also very much into vintage sewing machines. Sarge had a warehouse that was full of antiques and especially sewing machines. He liked to tinker around with them. And after Sarge passed away 2 years ago, she and her friend Leslie and her husband worked for Sarge at the antique store, and sadly Leslie's partner also passed away not long after Sarge. The two of them, in order to deal with their feelings of grief and heartache, decided to clean out the warehouse, and they approached the Butte-Silver Bow Archives in Butte about creating a display of vintage sewing machines. You'll hear Leslie talk about that as we get into the interview. But when I saw the Montana Moment segment, I contacted the archives, and they suggested that I contact Laura. And Laura invited me to come and view the exhibit in person. And I leaped at the opportunity. I love to drive around the state of Montana. It's a beautiful place. It was a beautiful drive on Sunday afternoon. The weather was warm. Traffic was light. I got to Butte Sunday evening, checked into the hotel, and on Monday morning, I met Leslie and Laura and Rose at the archives, and I toured the exhibit with Laura, and then the four of us sat down and had a conversation, and that is today's episode. I'm just sorry that I can't take everyone to the exhibit in person, but I did take lots of pictures, and I will put those on the show notes page. And I hope this will give you a little taste of what it was like to be at the exhibit and visit with these lovely ladies. I am here in Butte, Montana, at the Butte-Silver Bow Public Archives for the Welcome to the So Butte exhibit. And I am here with Laura Sargent and Leslie Doyle and Rose Brock. And these three ladies and I are going to have a conversation about this exhibit of antique quilts and vintage sewing machines and how it came to pass. So I've already toured the exhibit. It's fascinating. I wish I could bring all of you along with me, but we'll try and give you a little taste of it here with our interview. So Laura, I'm going to start with you and Leslie and have you tell us how this exhibit came to be.
Thank you, and thank you so much for coming down. We're glad to have you here. So, Leslie and I, my husband and I, own Broadway Antiques for a number of years, and in working with the other antiques, my husband liked the sewing machines and was able to fix them and repair them and do all of the woodwork on the cabinet and get those changed around too. So and then after he finished working on that part, I came and threaded them up and tension and bobbin tension and made them sew.
And the interesting thing, I find this so fascinating, I grew up on the East Coast and we've lived in Montana for 30 years, but you said that all of the sewing machines in this exhibit came from the Butte area.
Yes, that's true. We have, Leslie, 42 machines here?
I believe so.
42 machines. All of the machines work, and all of them are from, Silver Bow County.
Okay.
So, Silver Bow County area.
Okay.
So.
And there's quite a variety. There are...
Yes, on the first floor of the archives, Leslie and I decided that we would kind of go in chronological order. So the first floor are the oldest machines in the collection, starting with the treadle, the coffin top machines, and all of those Willcox and Gibbs, but mostly treadle machines are down there. And then on the second floor, it comes up to the newer machines from the 50s and 60s.
And Leslie, when we were talking before the archives opened, you had kind of an interesting story about what do we do with all of this stuff?
Yes. Well, Laura's husband, Sarge, passed away 2 years ago this month. And it was a devastating loss. I had worked for him for many years at the antique store. And at the time, my partner of 22 years, we didn't realize that he was terminally ill. And 5 months later, I lost him too. It was really hard. So Laura and I decided to weed through Sarge's warehouse. When I worked for him, he was purchasing estates, and there were multiple items in estates, and we would put pieces in the store and merchandise them, and then the overflow went to the warehouse. And nearly every estate here in Butte had a sewing machine, and some of them ended up in the store, and a lot of them sometimes they were in disrepair, or he used them for parts to repair other machines and so on. But there wasn't a sewing machine that Sarge didn't love.
That is true.
Everybody was turned away.
Yeah. And so he accumulated, because he had a place to store them, he accumulated, I think, hundreds. Yes. And Laura said, what now? Well, because of our personal losses, we teamed up and we needed a project. So it was warm, and we decided that we would get through the clutter in the warehouse and make Laura's life a little easier too. And so when we were in the thick of it, I said, these tell a story. They span decades. And she said, and every one of them came from here. So we decided that it was a story worth telling. So I said, what do you think about, and I do historic research on my Montana family. And so I'm familiar with the archive here, and decided that, well, why not? Why don't we just put together a presentation and see if they're interested in having an exhibit, because these machines and all of the stuff associated with them tell a story. But and so Laura and I created this handwritten proposal, and we made our appointment here, and we weren't sure that, we thought, what the heck? So we met with Aubrey and the director, and she loved the idea.
I'm sure she was thrilled.
Well, and we thought this was, it would be a wonderful thing for the women of this community, the women of the region, because of course Butte is so industrial. There's mining and cattle and railroad and sort of this masculine industries. Anyway, we made our proposal, and it was in the summer, and we got to work, and we installed in the dead of winter. We have a month to go, and then we have to dismantle the entire collection. But we worked feverishly on this. We found boxes of notions and equipment and tools that had come in. They were with an estate. We had to clean everything.
Wow.
Every spool, every brush, every attachment box,
Right.
had to be cleaned. So we would be up here during the day, and at night cleaning tools at our dining room tables.
Wow.
True enough. And then we had to draft Rose
Yes.
in the quilt club, because what's a sewing machine without a quilt?
Right. Right.
So
Rose, maybe you can tell us about the quilts that are on display down there?
Sure. So the Chateau Quilt Guild here in Butte obviously has a number of members, and many of us have older quilts, and so the call went out to our membership to, if anyone had some quilts that they would like to display, not for a day, not for a weekend, but for about 3.5 months, which was quite a trust statement for them. But the archives is a wonderful space here in Butte that everybody trusts and knows that things will be well taken care of and well displayed. And so our quilts came from several of our members. Some go back into the 1800s.
Wow.
And some are more recent.
I was saying to Laura as we were looking through the exhibit that I have looked at old quilt books or books, that document quilt histories, and I was particularly taken by one quilt, and the attribution for that quilt was a Mrs. Thomas so-and-so. And I thought, what a shame. We'll never know this woman's name. She's only recorded in history by her husband's name. And the amount of work that goes into some of these quilts is just astonishing. Both the grandmother's flower quilt, the hand piecing, and then the hand quilting. So it's wonderful to see those quilts displayed.
Right. And how the advent of the sewing machine altered that and made that a little more accessible to people who maybe had a little less time to do
Sure.
all the hand quilting.
Have you done, I know that the history of sewing here in Butte is part of the exhibit. Can any of you talk a little bit more about the things that were happening? So the Works Progress Administration and...
Yes. Brian Mogren from Rediscoveries is an antique store still in business here in Butte. And he has added to the exhibit with some of his wonderful bustle dresses that are down there that have been made from like I believe that one's 1850 or so.
Wow.
And it has the bustle and the corset and all the layers to it.
Yeah.
Beautiful dress. And then he's also supplied us with incredible pieces of fabric, just bolts of old fabric that's absolutely amazing to come up and feel. And then he also did the WPA display. The WPA was a huge organization here in Butte where women came. I believe it was this building right across the street here. And it was sewing machines were all set up in there, and women came up and sewed all day long. Dresses, aprons, flour sacks, jackets for mining, anything like that.
Wow.
So yeah, Brian did have a lot to do with the exhibit as well. So, and some of his pieces in here. His quilt downstairs where every quilter that worked on it signed their name. That's an amazing piece as well.
Yeah, the autograph quilt.
Yeah.
So if people are looking for some vintage fabric, Rediscoveries, a store on Park Street would be a great place to
that's
look.
good to know. I will put a link to that in the show notes.
And also the vintage patterns, he's got quite a few of those down there as well.
Awesome.
So
I'll have to come back to Butte.
yes,
Everybody needs
please.
to. Yes.
Yes.
So you've done a lot of research on the machines, and I was particularly taken with the button machine. And Rose, you said that Singer made specific machines for specific tasks. So that machine down there was designed only to sew buttons.
Yes. Yep. And a particular kind of button. It wouldn't sew just any kind of button. Some were made just for the ones that have a scoop in them with 2 holes. Some were made to sew the buttons on the backs of dresses.
Wow.
You know, all those little buttons. Some were made to sew the buttons onto shoes. I think that probably was one of the most eye-opening pieces of this whole exhibit for me, was to really stop and think about the integration of this sewing machine into so much of our industrial life in the 1800s and the 1900s. And there were, Laura has a wonderful book from 1914 that it's about an inch thick.
Yes.
Page per machine of all the different kinds of machines that Singer made. You think about the domestic machine in somebody's living room or spare bedroom, but there were sewing machines that sewed grain bags closed. I have a needle that my father-in-law was passed into his family, sewing wheat bags closed,
Yeah.
But there were machines that just sewed those grain bags closed. There were machines that sewed canvas tents, that sewed only tack for horses and saddles, boots. There's a wonderful boot making machine here.
And you said the corners of suitcases?
Yep, if you look at old suitcases, I think we just kind of take them for granted. There's leather around all places where the different surfaces meet, and you see some wonderful stitching. There was a machine just to do that. Bookbinding, that was, it used to be done by hand. Then came the sewing machine.
Right.
And the adaptations that were done, the engineering, absolutely amazing. So when people say it's a sewing machine. Your mind goes to that domestic sewing machine, sewing a dress or a quilt. But really, the sewing machine was quite an industrial feat. Yep.
We looked at it's the Lewis machine downstairs
Yes.
that sews the blind hems on
Yes.
drapes.
Yes.
Yes.
Who would have thought?
A machine that just sewed the hems, but then there was another one that did the pleats.
Right?
Very specific uses.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the Lewis is an industrial machine too, so you really kind of have to know what you're doing with that because it goes quick.
Sure.
And it goes from left to right instead of front to back like the domestic machines.
Yeah,
do.
it's a very cool machine.
Yes. So, in addition to the regular sewing machines that are here, we also have a display of all of the furs. At one time in Butte, there was between 5 and 7 different furrier shops here. And all of the furs that are on display downstairs are all from Butte. And there's also an example of a fur machine that's a 2-armed machine. The first arm of the machine separates the nap of the fur, while the second arm comes very similar to the Lewis machine from left to right to sew the skin. And so you're not getting the nap of the fur caught up in the stitching of the actual, whether it's a jacket or the fur capes or...
Right, and you and I talked a little bit about how those items were meant to be kept and handed down.
Yes.
That you didn't go out and buy a new fur coat every year.
That one was kept and probably went from the mother to the daughter to even the granddaughter.
Right.
Until we got to the place where the fur was environmentally
Right.
not appreciated. So
Yeah.
but even still, the old ones are still in incredible condition. The archives on May 2nd is having a fur exhibition up here. In addition to discussing the storage of the furs, they're going to have a taxidermist come in to identify the particular fur that you bring in or the ones that are downstairs.
Yeah.
And make an accurate identification of what type of fur it is. In this day and age, it's hard to tell.
Right.
Very hard. And so there'll also be somebody here to discuss the actual storage of furs. They do have to be stored, especially through the summer.
Right.
Not much in the winter, but especially through the summer. And we still do have a place here in town, Thomas's, down on Harrison Avenue, does a fur storage for people here in town.
I mean, it makes sense. It's Montana. There's a history of trapping and
So
sub-zero temperatures.
Absolutely. Yes.
And some very wealthy people in Butte at a certain point in time.
Yeah, true. That's true.
Who could afford some of those very nice furs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We tend to forget sometimes that this was a very wealthy area.
There were people here.
Yes.
There were some people here who were very wealthy.
That's a good way to put it.
And they didn't call it the richest hill on earth just because of the mining.
Right.
True now.
So the quilt show, there's a quilt show coming up?
Yes. Every other year, the Chateau Quilt Guild has a quilt show like many of the guilds around Montana. And this year, our show is on May 10th and 11th, Friday and Saturday. And it will be at the Mile High Event Center, which is connected to the Star Lanes at the end of Harrison across from the airport, from 10 to 6 on Friday and 10 to 3 on Saturday. And it's a time for our members to share with the public what we've been working on for the last 2 years. Every time we have a meeting, we have show and tell, but this is a grand show and tell. And this year our theme is, let's see if I can get it right, a mother load of quilts.
A mother load of quilts.
A mother load of quilts. So we're kind of, it's Mother's Day weekend. We're
Right.
honoring mothers, but also the mother lode is a mining term
Right.
of great wealth, a bonanza, a great find. So we will have about 50 members we have now, and mostly everyone is exhibiting anywhere from 1 to 3, 4, 5 items. Some items are judged, some are just for display. And we will also have some vendors, quilting machines, machine vendors. Laura, at the show, Laura will be there because many of the machines, and you might want to talk about this, in the exhibit here at the archives will be for sale. Is that right?
Yes, yep, that is true. Both Leslie and I feel that instead of having these machines in the warehouse at home getting older, that they need to be out in the public and really be an actual working machine. And then we were also feeling that there might be some bit of a resurgence, a renewed interest in using the old machines for repurposing clothes and just general repairs. And like your friend that's opening a new business with different textiles.
Right.
So,
And you said the Quilt Guild met here.
Yes, in February we had our monthly meeting here, and what we did that weekend, there are multiple members in the guild who have their own vintage machines, and several of us have hand crank machines that require no electricity, and so we brought those and let people from the public sew on them. They're very easy to sew on, and they have a nice rhythm and a nice clickety-clack sound to them. We have a member of our guild, Jill Barber, who doesn't even own an electric machine. She only sews her quilts, pieces them on a hand crank machine. And so imagine you're providing the power with your right hand by turning that crank and manipulating the fabric with your left hand under the needle. So that's how she pieces her quilts. She quilts them using a treadle machine. And she's quite a phenomenal quilter. She lives part-time in Idaho and part-time in a lovely old home here in Butte. But right now she has a quilt traveling in a juried show that was a replication of an older quilt. And she even tried to not just replicate it using the vintage machines, but part of the handwork on it she was doing by kerosene lamp.
Oh my goodness.
She gave that up after a few nights. But they're fun to use. Power goes up, you can still sew. You can take it camping with you. They're portable, and that was, yep. So they're very much in use.
Yes, definitely.
And we will have some of those at the quilt show for display. She'll be demonstrating how she does her work.
Okay.
So even if you see it, it's hard to believe that she can turn out the quilts that she does. They're just museum quality quilts.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And then there's another lady here whose name I can't remember, but you showed me her quilt hanging out there.
The Three Sisters, Rose.
Oh, Mary Vandergraaf is an
Okay.
artist and who's also a member of the guild, but she works in fiber. She dyes a lot of her own fabric, and one of her wall hangings is here. It's kind of a tribute to her mother, her grandmother, her aunt. And it's hanging at the top of the stairs.
It's spectacular.
It is, and that's hand-dyed fabric, silks, and then some quilting on it. So if you come to the archives to see this display Monday through Fridays, 9 to 5.
Yes.
The display is on 2 floors. Some people have come. They view all the older machines from 1800s to about 1940s something. Yep. On the first floor, and don't realize there's another whole second floor that is filled with machines from the 40s through the 70s.
Yeah, and the fur exhibit on the landing as well. And the archive is on the corner of Quartz and Main Street in Butte.
Well worth the visit.
Free.
Yes, and free admission.
Yes.
Yes, all we ask is that people sign the guest book and tell us what was the first item that they ever sewed. We're getting some interesting answers on that.
I wrote doll clothes because that was the first thing I sewed.
My mother sat me down at her big Singer.
Yeah.
And let me go at it. Right. Also, the Mining Museum has been inspired by this exhibit here, and they have pulled together in a special exhibit for the month of, I think it's up now through May, of their vintage sewing machines and some of their vintage quilts.
Oh, how cool.
Mm-hmm. So it's a destination weekend, I would think, for anyone interested in sewing or just the engineering aspects of machines.
Right.
Mm-hmm. To come to Butte and take in the Mining Museum exhibit and the Butte Archives.
Is there anything that I haven't asked that you want to talk about?
Yes, one more thing I would just like to say about the Butte-Silver Bow Archives. The building is absolutely amazing. It's an incredible building. If you haven't been up here, you need to come and see it, whether you're interested in the sewing machines or not. And then we have to say something about the staff here.
Sure.
Aubrey Japp and all the rest of the girls here at the archives have been absolutely phenomenal
So accommodating.
and willing to help, and just really special people.
That's great.
The Archives actually is an old fire station. If you're not familiar with Butte and don't know that, part of it is an old fire station, and a number of years ago, an addition was put onto it through a lot of work from Ellen Crane, the former archives director, and it's just worth it to come and see the quote on the front of the building.
I was reading those as I was coming in.
Yes.
And also the archives is totally handicapped accessible too, so both floors.
Well, I have really enjoyed this. I'm glad that they did enough publicity that word about this reached me in Kalispell.
Good.
And the 3.5 hour drive down here was wonderful. And this has been a rare experience and one that I will treasure. So, yeah. Leslie, go ahead.
One more thing. We hauled in 40-some, more than 42 machines, because we got a few more up here that it was decided, maybe that isn't going to work. So anyway, we sent them back to the warehouse. But so we were installing, and of course, many of the machines, or a good many of them, had been in the warehouse, and there was dust on them, and so for 2 days, the whole experience of moving in was exhausting.
I can imagine.
But we powered out on it, and then so we had to clean, and we scrubbed and getting down. I mean, none of us are young women anymore, and getting down and then scrubbing the metal on the treadle machines, especially, and they're so beautifully manufactured with all the scroll work, but it's just a haven for things to get caught in there. So they have a receiving room here, and we spent a couple of days. We did recruit some volunteers to come in and help scrub because they offered. And so on the day before the exhibit opened, Laura said, "We've got to bring the Lotus machine, the treadle, up here." And it's the one that when you walk in the door to the right with the biographical information about Sarge. It's that machine. And we were so exhausted from cleaning that, everyone backed off of that responsibility, and no one wanted to do it. And then I said, wait a minute here. This is how he would get them, because those machines were stored away in barns and sheds and old garages and even in basements on back porches. So we left the Singer Lotus machine as is. And anyway, it was a relief that no one had to draw straws to see who was going to clean that thing and it really lended well to the exhibit and to the history of it.
It sounds like you said you sort of felt like he was tapping you on the shoulder to do this, and I think probably or smacking you in the face.
Oh, we have cursed him many times.
Yeah, a couple at least. It's true.
Actually, both of them, Sarge and my dad. And but so Laura and I tease. Well, I wonder if they're seeing what we're up to now.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are, and approving of all of it.
Well, I'm really proud of it, and it helped both of us to get through a very difficult winter.
Sure.
True enough.
Well, I appreciate all three of you taking the time to have this conversation.
Thank you for coming here.
Thanks for coming.
We hope you will come back.
I will come back. I definitely will come back.
Yeah, we'd love to have you.
Okay.
Yeah. This whole exhibit is done and dedicated to the memory of Sarge, but it has evoked so many memories. We had an open house, and then once a month there's an archives sponsors a brown bag lecture series, and people fill the room. But those people also have walked through this exhibit, and so many memories of their own interactions with sewing machines. They were centerpieces in the house in many homes.
And the men too.
Many men had learned to sew.
Well,
Yes.
and I cannot tell you how many times in the opening and the other times that I've been up here that I've heard men say, oh, my grandma had that, or my mother had that. I remember that in my mother's sewing room.
So, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So it's 2 floors of memories is what it is.
2 floors of memories. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, nice.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. I had such a good time in Butte, and I hope to be getting back there before too long. I do need to make a correction for last week's show. I said that Alex Jackson was from Idaho, and he's not. He lives in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So I apologize for that mistake. Mistakes do happen, even though I try to get things right. So if you are looking for Alex Jackson, don't look for him in Idaho. He's in Colorado Springs. As always, I would appreciate it if you went to Spotify or iTunes or Google Podcasts or any one of the podcatchers where the podcast is listed and left a review. That really does help other people to find the podcast. As I mentioned last week, I now have a guest form on the podcast website. If you are interested in being a guest, you can fill out and submit the guest form. I will get back to you as scheduling allows. It's not a guarantee that you'll be accepted as a guest. It depends on what kinds of topics I haven't covered yet, but I do invite people to submit the guest form, and I do keep those on file. Show notes can be found at the podcast website as well, and that is at www.thestraightstitchpodcast.com. I can be reached at janet@janetzabo.com. And I'm thinking I might have to go take some allergy medication before long. I think the pine pollen is starting to fall from the trees. So until next episode, I hope you have a great week and that you get to go sew something.